Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page.
Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. First, the price. The price of Bitcoin is down today, down 2.84% with a last of 79,086, a high of 81,619, a low of 78,570. That's $1 for 1,264 Satoshis, very close to the 1,000 Satoshi barrier. Our top story today, Consensus 2026 after party at strip club sparks backlash. Shocking. The official Consensus 2026 after party at a strip club called E11 Even Miami 11 has triggered widespread backlash and debate in the crypto community. It was kicked off with a post by Jess at the Web3 Jess, saying that the massive official clothing party by CoinDesk was a massive step backwards. Hosting the flagship event at a strip club wasn't just inappropriate, it was incredibly lowbrow for an industry trying to grow up. She says she's all for alcohol, music, and a good time, have a DJ or a club space, but not at a strip club. Additionally, there were huge problems with thousands of attendees left outside. The strip club apparently had about 1,000 people in it. There was 4,000 to 5,000 people who had paid, who had tickets, who were left outside. You can see here some of the girls on the tables with the CoinDesk logo in the background. It says, the best event, Consensus, the best event. We've got some more art from the show. Here's Brooke Lacey at Brooke J. Lacey, showing one of the crypto bros, even wearing his vest, the startup bro vest, snatching some of the dollar bills from the girls, just very low. And it doesn't get low without showing this video, not appropriate for children. Let's go back to the beginning. This guy seems to be peeing on the side of the bar. He then falls, hitting his head on the bar, knocking his glasses down, seemingly falling and slipping in his own urine at the Miami strip club. An excellent example of Bitcoin culture, I suppose, in 2026. Victoria Jones, what do you think about the Consensus party? We've talked about this before on the Bitcoin group, but we'll get to the AI report after this. You've seen the man falling in his own urine. You've seen everything now, right? Can you imagine if you were there? This could have been on your phone.
Yeah, it looks a bit grim, and that slip looks very painful, that bash to the head. But to be completely honest, it reminds me of when I first went to university, and it was, a load of immature people who'd finally been let out of the restrictions of the family home, who just went crazy. And I know Jess obviously has made some criticisms about the fact that we need to grow up if we're going to be taken seriously by TradFi. Although to be fair, I've seen plenty of Wall Street parties that get just as bad. So I'm not sure if that's a rational argument. But yeah, I mean, it does seem very immature and not a good look, which is a bit unfortunate, really.
Especially that we've come so far and have a giant conference like Las Vegas actually go off without this kind of trouble. I mean, I'm sure there was strip clubs and fun in Las Vegas too, but not at the official event, not at one of these parties where, as the ladies have said, they want to network, they want to go to the parties, they feel uncomfortable in this environment. They're missing out on deals. This isn't fair. Right. And there's no reason this party couldn't be, like she said, at a rave. Everyone could come, have a DJ, have all the alcohol you want. You probably still have the guy pissing on the bar, but we just wouldn't have the girls in the background with the image and the CoinDesk logo and all of that. And if it seems like we've talked about this before, it's because we have. We have another great report this week, who has created transcripts for all of the Bitcoin group episodes and can read them all at once. It went through all of our reports. We've been talking about this since 2013, when we predicted that there would be a QR code tipping for girls in 2013. That came true about 5 years later. We talked about the porn industry adopting Bitcoin. And then we had Will Pengman with his ethics speech relaying Andreas's framing that we are against this. And then, as the AI says, the group moved on. We can't cover one thing forever, but it was here back in 2013 when Will Pengman said there was a major concern, something may have heard. Andreas said, women talk about it in the space. There is a problem afoot with the way women are treated in this space. And we talked about how wrong it was. Will Pengman and the panel agreed. We said everyone should be comfortable at Bitcoin meetups. That's not acceptable behavior. We talked about it many other times, the QR code, how that came true, various other things, how Stephanie Murphy and Michelle Seven went to conferences and saw nothing but naked dancing girls, how there were no girls on the panel, and they suggested that if you are invited as a woman, you should ask that they invite 2 or 3 other women and suggest women for them. We also talked a lot about the porn industry and how it links into Bitcoin, and how now the conferences are drowning in sausage. So certainly we are going to be an all Bitcoin male choir if it keeps going like this, if we keep having celebrations where a gentleman pees on the bar and then falls to the ground. Could have been any startup bro anywhere, but it had to be a crypto startup bro. Victoria, what do you think about the incredible report from the AI, the Bitcoin Group's history of talking about this? We didn't even talk about the major event. I think it was 18 or 19 at the same Miami conference where people were very upset. They had the event at the strip club. I recall, I think I only went to Miami in 2014 or 15. They did have some girls walking around the party. I think they were in kind of body paint. So they were naked, but not naked kind of thing. And even then, Andreas was mad about it. Other people were mad. They left the party. It was just a normal bar, though. It wasn't a strip club like these events. What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm impressed that the World Crypto Network has held itself to very high standards over the years. It's one of the reasons why I was always a fan of the show, and I'm happy to be a part of it now. I think it is important, in any sphere of life, respect goes a long way. And why should it be any different when it comes to crypto or banking? I mean, traditionally, banking was a very male-dominated industry, and so you did have this kind of culture going on there as well. But you want the idea of crypto is we're trying to get banking to grow up because we're like the next iteration of finance, hopefully, by making it digital. But how can we grow up if we're still repeating the same bad behaviors? And so, I think fair credit to Jess for calling them out. I think it's appropriate that, someone should say that they're not happy about this and demonstrate it. But I think there's a long history behind this. Our world has traditionally been quite male dominated. The fact that women are now getting a chance to speak up and have a voice is a fairly recent innovation. And so obviously, just by speaking up, it can still, lead to a lot of backlash. So, we always have to be quite careful in terms of, what we say, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be said at all. I think it is important. It is important to speak up about these things. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that women still need to do those kinds of jobs in order to earn money in the first place. I mean, I don't know anyone who really wants to be objectified in terms of their physical appearance. Everyone wants to be known as who they are as a person. And so, I think it's unfortunate that women still need those jobs, and many people are still prepared to, invest in it. And I think it's poor show by a crypto company to respond to that, even if there is a lot of demand for it, which there clearly was, because there were thousands of people lining up down the road in order to enter. I mean, no one's given us any kind of reports on the combination of people who were in the crowds. It may well be that there were a number of women who wanted to take part anyway, regardless of what they thought was inside. But I think it's a shame. I think the world needs to grow up, really. The fact that these kind of parties even exist, or that people want to take part, or earn money in that kind of environment. No shade on people who are still in the phase of life where they need to do that, but it certainly wouldn't be my choice. So,
Well, they certainly should have gotten a larger space and had a shorter line for the bathroom. That much is clear. As for the rest of this, it's amazing to be this long in the industry and that the industry is still so young. We can go back to 2014, 2016, when there were the initial reports and the initial upsets about this at the conference. And from Twitter, I've seen people volunteering that said, hey, we ran consensus in 16, 17, whatever. We solved these problems. We fixed this. But the problem is we've lived so long now that the people who came in and fixed it, they've been fired. A whole new set of people has been come in. CoinDesk has been sold to a company called Bullish. It's some kind of stock market company. We don't know what's going on. But again, it's a whole new group of guys. And they did the same thing that the previous group of guys did. So this is not surprising. And sadly, we just keep repeating this over and over again. Another note from the AI report, we had an interview with Justina from Women in Bitcoin at the Malta Bitcoin convention, and she said much the same thing. She said it was 97% male. The only women there were the booth babes, and they were told not to talk to you. She tried to engage them and teach them about crypto, person to person, and they were like, no, we cannot talk to you, and so forth. So that's very unfortunate to see that still happening. This was a huge issue on Twitter, multiple days, people going back and forth if they were outraged enough. Victoria, did you see it on Twitter? Do you think that the community solved it with the outrage? Do you think it's going to happen again? That's the exit question.
Well, my first answer is yeah, absolutely, it's going to happen again. I mean, people don't grow up that quickly. So clearly they haven't learned anything from 2013, and I predict that, in another 10 years we'll probably still be having the same conversation. But no, I didn't observe the conversation. Life has taught me for long enough now that sometimes arguing about stuff doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It's just kind of like, if you want no part of it, stay away. And
Well,
leave them to it. If you want to slip on your own urine and bang your head in a bar, be my guest, but I'll leave you to it.
Well, it was fast and furious, and they were throwing it at each other, and you did this and they did that. And a lot of the highlighting went on how you could see the company logos behind the girls on the tables, and just what a bad look it was. How the girls weren't happy, the girls weren't making money, the guys weren't tipping. Like, I don't know that a strip club works if you fill it with that many people. Like, it just doesn't function that way as a business. So again, just a bad idea and not a big enough room. So just a bunch of nonsense all around. Unfortunate to see it, but again, Miami, right? I mean, it's Chinatown, man. Things just happen there. So I'd watch out. Moving on to issue 2. Bitcoin shrugs off the Clarity Act gains as institutions sell amid surging Treasury yields. Yes, we've got good news in Bitcoin. The Clarity Act is going to be voted on and likely approved. Brian Armstrong and Coinbase have given up their attempt to defend the stablecoin yield industry, where you could have made 4% on your savings account, allowing you to stick with the banks and make 0.1 or less percent on your savings. Oh, well. On the bright sides, we will get approved crypto, which seems to be mainly trending towards stablecoins, which could cause a flood of new money into the industry. That's why the prices went up. Then the prices went back down because the inflation report was terrible, and the Federal Reserve, which people had hoped would cut rates, allowing money to be cheap and investment to go up, is actually going to have to raise rates, making money expensive and investment to go down and risk to go down because things are so bad in the United States with the inflation issue. Victoria, what do you think? The Clarity Act is out there, allowing, once again, Bitcoin and blockchain instead of Bitcoin, ICOs instead of Bitcoin, stable coins instead of Bitcoin is the latest flavor, but legalized stable coins get you a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a transparent move towards centralized digital currency. Like I've said before on this show, they had a number of attempts where they were going to talk about making their own, but they've gone for the easier option, as they are prone to do, which is to hijack someone else's invention and adopt it that way. And of course, fiat currencies rely on the legal system, which is why they're using the legal system in order to support their stable coins. But of course, ultimately Bitcoin will disrupt that. It's unfortunate, that they've. Am I correct in thinking that the Clarity Act is going to stop people from earning interest on their stable coins? Is that what you said?
Yes, it'll absolutely stop that in the United States. It was predicted this could cause a flight of money out of the banks where they give you low interest savings accounts into the stable coins where normal people who don't have investment connections or information would get high interest stable coins. That will be stopped.
Yeah. So, that's a clear attack on the crypto industry, in order to support the banks, and to allow a stable coin as a way of taking over from traditional ways of managing money. It's a real shame. I mean, I'm sure on this show we've predicted it in the past. I know that I've commented in the past and going, that's clearly the agenda. In order to save the existing fiat system, they need to be able to have control over how the money works. For the last 400 years, it's been a gradual process of having a number of wars, spending far too much money on those wars, and then having to create debt in the background in order to pay for it. And of course, it's all swept under the carpet, so no one's seeing it in front of it. But of course, it still has an effect on the economy. That's where we get inflation from. And in order to solve that inflation problem, they need more control over the central banking system, which they're currently working on. I think my personal opinion on that is that that's exactly what invading Venezuela and Iran is all about. But in the meantime, while they're trying to get control of all the central banks by mopping up the last two outliers, they're clearly setting the stage for a central bank digital currency, because of course, once we have a central bank digital currency, they're in a situation where they're going to be able to manipulate exactly how we spend our money. Interest rates won't be a part of the equation anymore. Once they've got all the central banks under one umbrella and they've got their central bank digital currency, it's game over. This is what Bitcoin was invented to disrupt, which is why it's so important that we did protect it and we help people understand, what it's there for. So, yeah, I mean, the Clarity Act doesn't surprise me, but I think it's worrying. It's, just another example of how they're using their existing legal system in order to support their existing fiat currency. And, the sooner Bitcoin disrupts all of that, the better, in my opinion.
It does seem, again, as we go back through the history of technology and see how radio, initially a people's medium, anyone could have a radio station, newspapers, television, the internet, and now even cryptocurrency are going to be captured. How they build a thing around it. They take some of the new things that are about it. You can send money one way. It's uncancelable. Although stablecoins are censorable. You can't send a stablecoin to your favorite political cause. You can't send it to someone they don't want you to send it to. They're, of course, trackable. So it's all the kind of negative downsides that you could get from a system. But like you say, it's legalized, it's institutional, it's official. So you're getting the official downsides from this system. So we'll see how it goes, but it doesn't look good for Bitcoin. Moving on to the exit question, predicting against the magic 8-ball, the source of all truth in this universe. It's somehow 50-50, even though it's weighed like 80-20 towards yes. Victoria Jones, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Well, it seems to have hit a wall of resistance, so I'd say it's going to be lower.
I'm sticking with higher, although it's gotten really easy for everyone to say, oh, it just goes higher. We're in the uptrend. I predict this. I predict that. Tom Lee is back again. Good old Tom Lee. And Michael Saylor, of course, who we're going to talk about again in a few minutes. But for now, the ball has the center stage. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? says, reply hazy, try again. But it's very easy to read. It's very easy to read as it kicks the can down the road. Great job, Ball. Punting, not predicting is probably the best option most of the time. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got new shorts and the Bitcoin group at worldcryptonetwork.com. Check it out. Issue 3, sudden Bitcoin price surge fuels huge $16 trillion super cycle prediction. That's a lot of words. They've said the price of Bitcoin could double. They said the price of Bitcoin could triple. And now they're saying $16 trillion super cycle. This could even cause the price of Bitcoin to reach $1 million in 5 years, not in 10 or 20. Victoria Jones, super cycle, excitement, Clarity Act. Obviously, this happened before the bad economic news. But what do you think about the underlying truth? Bitcoin's being legalized. Family offices, huge investors can suddenly invest into crypto and then pull their money out and then invest again into crypto. What an exciting future we have. Do you think we're in a super cycle?
I don't think we'll hit a super cycle until the fiat system collapses, to be honest. I think a sensible strategy with Bitcoin is just recognizing that the system we have is extremely fragile. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin is the clear winner. It has the potential to be the winner, but there's still a lot of work to do in order to make sure that we have that future. I mean, it's narrative and, the fundamentals are strong, but there are still issues in terms of how it develops, some of which we've talked about on this show over the last few months. So no, I don't think it's imminent. I don't think it's imminent. And I think also with the existing financial system, the people who run the money are very well aware of the potentials of inflation. They've all studied, hyperinflation in Weimar Germany. They understand how the money cycles work. They've all seen the recent financial crashes, 2001, 2008. 2008 is becoming a distant memory for a lot of people, but, people like myself who were tangibly affected by the 2008 financial crisis, which was one of the things that made me study money in the first place and get into Bitcoin. For some people, that's becoming a distant memory. We've now got a whole generation of people who've worked on Wall Street for whom they didn't live through that. And so, I think it's when you get to that kind of stage, people have very short memories and they start making risky bets that they really shouldn't be making. And the fact that the Federal Reserve is flip-flopping so quickly now between whether or not they raise rates or drop rates really suggests how close they are to a knife edge, because they're changing their tune almost on a monthly basis now. It used to be on a yearly basis. They would kind of have the trend of, for the near future, the rates are going up, and then for the near future, the rates are going down. But, at the beginning of the year, rates were going to be going down, then they went up, then they were going down. When you start to, I personally think when you start to see that flip-flopping get closer and closer together, that's when it's really hard to predict, because if even the Federal Reserve doesn't know which way they should go to kind of keep things under control, that's the point at which they probably are losing control. So I'd say we're getting closer and closer. How close, it's difficult to say, but, I'm keeping an eye on it. And, those of us who understand what we're up against are watching very closely with great interest to see how it plays out.
Well, sadly, as much as I'm here to slam dunk on the Federal Reserve and say they can't predict jack, I think it's impossible to predict with this Trump chaos going on. It seems like the Iran war was completely unplanned, even to the point of not rearming local military bases that would likely be under attack, as to not building more missiles beforehand so that we wouldn't have a potential shortage, giving strength to our potential enemy, China, who might be saying, well, the US has 50% missiles or 25% missiles. It's time to go into Taiwan. And if something like that happens, if the Iran war happens, if it's been a long time now, the Ukraine war happens, all of your Federal Reserve notes go out the window. So I think it's impossible for them to predict through that. But it is funny, as you say, Victoria, people were so gung-ho, we're going to lower rates, we're going to let the money go, everyone's going to invest, things are going to go up. And now things are so bad, which has been obvious for a long time, not just to, dump on the Trump administration, but the jobs reports have been bad. They blocked that October jobs report. It didn't even come out for the first time in like 80 years since we've had jobs reports. They were unable to make it because the information wasn't there, because there was so much, again, just chaos going around. And it's not a left-right thing. It's when you pick up the phone to call somebody, they're not there. There's chaos in the system. But it is funny with the Forbes article. I do love the headline, Super Cycle. It reminds me of Super Volcano. This is big. It's really big. It's Super Cycle big. But again, it's people saying things we said 10 years ago. They hear about Bitcoin, they hear about cryptocurrency, the scarcity, they hear how it works, and they get all excited. Of course, this doesn't take into account that everyone reads their excited posts and then acts based upon it. To say that it's very scarce, there's 21 million units. People create these rehypothecation farms, and we don't know what's going on behind the black box, but they're likely rehypothecating Bitcoin. So the thesis here, we're in a super cycle, has to then take into account these rehypothecation farms where people are presumably selling Bitcoin they don't own. That will come to bear again. And as well as just the idea that if you say, well, we're going up like crazy, somebody else is going to bet on the other side of that to collect all of that money against it. And then eventually that person runs out of money against it. And it does actually go up if it's meant to go up. But it never goes up on schedule. It never goes up when you want it to. And Forbes, especially Forbes magazine, Steve Forbes, ran for president on the flat tax, would have been a disaster for working people, but great for the rich, has done way too many of these articles. Billy Bambraw, every single article is like a breathless headline, like crypto is going up 5,000%. You won't believe where it stops, and stuff like this. So I got to really fault them on that and try not to cover them anymore. But still, super cycle, super volcano. Victoria, what do you think about the headlines, the Bitcoin excitement, and that, it's true. Like when we got into Bitcoin, I looked at it and I was like, it's $100 a coin, it's $300 a coin. Why isn't this a million like tomorrow? Why isn't this million like next week? Like, okay, the information got to me. I'm just, reading the Slashdot, internet dude. Shouldn't it get to Forbes? Shouldn't it get to those guys? And now even 10 years later, the information's getting them to them, but the environment's not the same. There's so many stable coins. There's so many coin bases and other things where we don't know what's going on behind there. Do they have all the coins they say they have? Nobody proves it. What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the introduction of the ETFs have muddied the waters quite significantly. And obviously, if you've got these family offices who think they're now investing in Bitcoin, but they're just investing in an ETF, it's not the same thing. When we were talking about it 10 years ago, you were talking about how to buy it on an exchange and then transfer it into your hardware wallet. But people don't think about that anymore, especially with TradFi, because obviously the ETFs seem like an easier option. I've spoken to a couple of professionals in very recently actually, where they were talking about the fact that they wanted to get into Bitcoin, and the concept of buying it on an exchange and transferring it into wallet was just like, what's that? They're just interested in the fact in buying Bitcoin because they've seen everyone has fabulous gains from it. And so it's almost like they're picking up on this narrative and thinking it's going to continue without realizing what has changed underneath. I think the ETFs are a big problem. I think if we suddenly have a financial crisis, and the ETFs are suddenly having to sell, if Michael Saylor suddenly has to sell, which we're about to talk about, it will make a difference to the price of Bitcoin. And so even in that situation, I think the price of Bitcoin is going to be knocked quite significantly. I think after everything's over, it'll probably be one of the things that rises ahead of everything else, all other things being equal, and it's software developing it in the right way. But until we reach that point, there's a lot of confusion. And 10 years ago, when I was interested in this and watching your show, I spent a lot of time because it was very new. And I learned about gold and silver first. And then, of course, I realized that, having run my own business, that gold and silver was completely impractical. So, what's the digital solution? We're going to digital world. What digital solutions do we have? And that's when I learned about Bitcoin. And I was just like, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense, and we'll get into it. But I trod very carefully because there wasn't the same kind of information or the same kind of grifting that we've got now. And so I had to make that decision very, very carefully. And then, of course, over time, as you watch things develop and I watch my understanding being compromised by all these other issues. It's kind of like, well, it's not as clear cut anymore. It was clearer cut then. It's not now, but of course, everybody's maybe buying in on that understanding where things have changed. And that doesn't mean that, things are over for Bitcoin, but it is important to understand the nuances of what's going on because it is different now. Um, so yeah, people have to be careful.
It is interesting. It almost has a religious dynamic to it where the people are doing the actions. They're buying the Bitcoin like you would be helping people, but they're not actually buying the Bitcoin. They're not actually helping the people. They're not helping themselves either. They're not getting the beep in the wallet where it's like, you have a beep, 0 point, I don't know how far to take it now, 0.0001 that you're sending around for fun, that you send to your laptop, and you send it to your phone, you send it to Coinbase, and you send it back out of there to your laptop again. And you understand how, you really own this. You can really send it. You can scan a QR code somewhere, send it to a poster, send it to a YouTuber, whatever you want to do. But they're not doing that. They're not getting the beep. They're not getting the action. So again, maybe we need Jesus to come in and clean out the money changers from the temple. Because the people are not getting it. They have this incredible invention that does all of these things. And we talked a little about this last week about Saylor and how he has this two-legged stool, and he doesn't see the currency. And he's like, it's digital gold and it's computers and it's not a currency because that doesn't fit my plans. But without that, it doesn't tie it all together. If these people aren't getting excited about the invention and that we can use this internet-based money without a centralized server, and you can send it to anybody you want without any censorship, and they're not seeing that as, oh, that's the thing. Like, not that you can buy it on the stock market and make mad gains, right? That's the small thing. You're not getting the cosmic religious nature of this. You're just meditating. You're not going to the next level. I don't know. You're just praying, but you're not helping people. I don't know what it is, but they're not doing it. They're not catching on. It's not working. So I think it's just going to take longer and go slower. And there's nothing else that we can do about it. We can all get out and push, but they're pushing in the wrong direction. They're pushing against us. They're pushing sideways. We're not on the same road. We're not all like, let's make this cool currency together. They're like, it's digital gold. And we're like, it's a cool currency and it's digital gold. Like it does all these things, but they're not seeing it. So, and now on to the next issue, which, like Victoria said, it blends very well. Michael Saylor says remarks about selling Bitcoin were intended to jam short sellers and haters. So I don't know what this means. He said this in an official Tuesday earning call that we will probably sell some Bitcoin to fund a dividend to inoculate the market. And he got a huge load of crap for this because he was so incredibly religious in the first place. If he hadn't have come out so hard, you should never sell, you're stupid if you sell, you're dumb if you ever spent it, so on and so forth. Maybe people wouldn't be so bad when he has to retract and say, well, of course, we're a company, we're a business. If things are up, we have to sell, we have to buy, we have to do these things as a business. But I don't know how to deal with this. Is he a big child? Is this an Elon Musk situation where he's, I don't know, perhaps on K or some random drug that makes him act erratically? I don't have any information on that. That's not I don't know what's going on. I just feel like to say one thing, especially in an official earnings call, not like in a tweet or a little side conversation overheard at the beach, Michael Saylor is thinking about selling. And again, I'm not even mad at him for selling or even thinking about it. I think, again, it's very reasonable. But this idea now that he's going to just yo-yo and play with everybody and we're all just idiots for listening to what he says, kind of things like, seems like we're idiots for listening to what he says. Victoria, what do you think about Michael Saylor? And it's all just a joke. Ha, 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 ha.
Well, Michael Saylor's kind of made a name for himself because he had a lot of money that he put into Bitcoin, at a good moment. It wasn't the perfect moment. In fact, a number of years before he actually bought into Bitcoin, there's a number of famous tweets where, he thought it was ridiculous. And why would anyone invest in it? And then a couple of years later, of course, he became the biggest proponent of Bitcoin. So, this isn't the first time that he's been seen to contradict himself. I think he's someone who knows how to produce a good tagline in order to make a name for himself. And clearly, he knows how to push himself forward and say things in a loud manner in order to gain attention. That's probably, partly what helped him become famous in the first place. But as we've mentioned on this show a number of times before, there are a number of flaws in his thinking, which we've dissected in the past. I think we've even mentioned in the past that, of course, he could sell his Bitcoin at some point. That's the whole point of being the person who holds on to it. And it's ridiculous, if the price was dropping like a stone, it was going to have a significant effect on his personal net wealth or the net wealth of the company, or if something went completely wrong with the software or any other big deal with Bitcoin. Of course he would sell it. It'd be insane not to. So, the fact that he ever had that narrative in the first place where he said you never sell your Bitcoin, it's just like, no. So, but the more he kind of contradicts himself publicly, the more he undermines his own reputation. But, people seem to have very short memories. It's like they go around a goldfish bowl, and it's like if he didn't say it in the last month, then they completely forget that he ever said it at all. And so, it's like they have to be persistently reminded that things are not necessarily the way Michael Saylor sees them, and unfortunately has to contradict his own narrative to educate them on that.
Well, I think you're right, Victoria. I think too many people lose track of the whole point of being the person who holds on to it is to sell it for more. Sometimes we lose track and we want to sell it for tons more. All right. And then we have to wait a whole nother cycle or whatever to get ourselves in and all of that. And I think that's just happened to Michael Saylor. He and El Salvador just rode through an incredible bear market, and they rode it hard the whole way. I watched, and everything went back up, and everyone wrote the "They are such geniuses" article. But then what happened, and against all odds with the so-called crypto president, is that everything went to shit, right? The whole investment thesis, everything, the entire market, the entire world, the economy, the tariffs, we were blasted back to the 1920s. We have no idea what's happening, right? Huge time warp. Everybody's freaking out. Nobody's plans worked out. It's not MicroStrategy. It's not mini strategy. It's not any of the strategies. And again, he's not feeling good about that. So he's trying to make a new strategy. And where does he need to look but mad Bitcoins? In an article that's no longer on Yahoo Finance, you have to search for Coin Rivet because this beautiful internet keeps erasing old articles, which is going to work out badly in the end. You could learn that Mad Bitcoin suggested years ago at, I think it was the Birmingham conference, the guy interviewed me, and I said, and it was hard to say because no one likes to hear this, HODL plus profits. If you're up a ridiculous amount, selling 10% would change your life, which is a common stock market thing. I certainly didn't invent that. Sell the 10%. It's not so bad. Like cutting 10% off your investment every month, or 5 or 1 or whatever you feel like. And again, not financial advice, blah, blah, blah. I listened to a YouTuber and did exactly what they said the complaint letter. But you've got to sell a little bit when you're crazy up. And it's hard, and we forget, and we want to compound. And I imagine Saylor is no smarter than the rest of us looking at our portfolio and say, oh, if it would only double from here, if it would only 10x from here, I'd be set. And if you just cut 10% off there, you wouldn't have to sell so much now. And I'll bet he's feeling that. And he's upset, and now he's playing these mind games, and he's being Elon Musk, and he's messing with the media and the fans and whatever. And, oh, it's about the haters. But I think what he said last week was more true. A company has to be a company. We're trying to make money. We're going to sell some of this Bitcoin. And it even sounds like, again, he has a whole, I'm going to make a new vehicle. I'm going to make a dividend. He has his whole Wall Street magic with his jargon. He's not just going to sell it and buy another beach island. But he's got magic. He's got jargon. He's going to fix it. Victoria, what do you think? Final thoughts on Saylor selling? Like, seems inevitable, right?
Yeah, well, I like Starship's comment where he said if Sailor ever does sell, he'll be doing so when he's in distress of some sort, which is likely selling the bottom. He won't ever sell the top. And yeah, he's kind of demonstrated that, really. Um, yeah, I mean his understanding is flawed, and you can tell that from some of his narrative. I think if you've got a really good strategy, most people don't shout it from the rooftops. It's a great way to end up really humiliated. If you've got a good strategy, keep it to yourself because everyone makes mistakes. And when you're doing it, it's the whole cycle of life. Sometimes you do well, sometimes you don't do so well. And so unfortunately, if you want all the credit at the top, you've got to take the humiliation when it goes wrong as well. And so, he's put himself in that position and clearly he feels he can take on the haters, good for him. But yeah, it means everyone's constantly nitpicking and analyzing his strategy. And sometimes he does well, sometimes he doesn't do as well. That doesn't mean, he's necessarily a genius. It just means someone's focused on a particular part of his story at a particular point in time. But, it's never the whole story.
It is really too bad they didn't have a plan for victory. You could even see it when the price was going up, and you'd say to yourself, well, if MicroStrategy or El Salvador or another major hodler sold 10% right now, it would wreck the whole market and we'd decline. And if you say that and you really think about it and you're like the money person, the MicroStrategy, the one with all the money, that's good for you too. You just sold ahead of the market decline. You got the first sell in. If it does decline, you could put another 20%, 30%. You could get in a more defensive position, but you were the first sell. You were the market leader, the one with all the ideas. Instead, I think Starship's really nailed it. He'll never sell the top. He'll always have these desperate, sad sells to cover his other investments because he can't time the market. No one can time the market, even these smart guys. And again, with the Nakamoto's thing and David Bailey and all that, same thing. They say they're going to time the market. They pissed everyone off. But now if we look at Saylor, he kind of needs to time the market a little bit. Maybe some AI software or something's not a bad idea. Maybe Saylor would listen to SaylorBot. He won't listen to anybody else, sir, but we've made this AI, sir. And you could just tell him all this stuff. It's based on all these things. It's thought about it for 5 days. It says we should sell 10%, sir, so that we're in a profit for the next 100 years. Oh, great. Can you imagine your quarterly reports? You're like, we're still in a profit, for that sell we made 90 years ago. That was a really good sell. Thanks, everybody. We haven't sold since then, but, that one was real good. So, and you got to be open to that. I don't know why they wouldn't be open to winning. How much winning do you need? They need a lot more. They don't have enough winning.
And if you use an AI bot, it will tell you that Michael Saylor has sold Bitcoin in the past. So I think that I made that comment once on the show before, and someone actually emailed me personally and kind of said, "Where is the evidence that Michael Saylor has ever sold?" And it was just like, well, if you ask ChatGPT, it will tell you.
Well, and that came up, I don't have it here, but in last week's AI report, we discussed it on the Bitcoin group that Michael Saylor discussed and actually did sell Bitcoin for tax loss harvesting, which is some fancy accounting thing where you sell your Bitcoin, you wait a little bit, maybe the price goes down a little bit, you buy it back, and then all of a sudden it's like you didn't own it or something. It affects your taxes. And again, totally reasonable business activity unless you're a zealot. And again, your zealousy has been fed by Michael Saylor banging this drum and being really simple about it. And I don't know why he was so simple about it. I don't know why he doesn't see it as a currency and all these other things. But for whatever reason, with his investment and his company, he said, this is a digital gold. You need to invest. You need to hold it forever. And bang, 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 I have nothing else to say. And that kind of simplicity got you in trouble. That kind of simplicity led you to here, where you haven't sold any and you can't sell any and you're up and down and you're freaking out all the time. And you don't have the background that Saylor has, not only in these kind of investments, but also owning lots of mansions and cars and stuff. I remember a while ago, there's a big story about Elon Musk. He was so focused on going to Mars that he was selling all of his houses, and even like, I don't know, it was like Grace Kelly's house or Fred Astaire's house or something, some classy Hollywood old houses he's bought that he was going to hold till he died. And he's like, F it, I'm getting off this planet. And I thought that was noble. I thought that was a good idea, and he should sleep in the office, only to be horrified years later at what he's up to and the disaster that he's made. I can't even buy a Cybertruck because it's a politically charged object. I want to drive in a RoboCop like future car with shiny panels, right? I don't care. But it's a politically charged object. You can't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And that's because of his actions. The same thing with Trump. If he had just gone on vacation, not done the 1920s tariffs thing, not done the crazy war with Iran from the 70s, all this other kind of just insane stuff, no offense, not politically left or right, just done nothing, the economy would be better, the rates would be lower, the investment would be higher, and he'd still be on vacation at Mar-a-Lago golfing. Like, it still would have worked out. But he heard these ideas, he had to try them out. He had to see what was going to happen. Like, the 1920s are back again. It's great. We've got a couple more short stories. Coinbase outage disrupts crypto trading and transfers amid Amazon service failure. Coinbase says Amazon Web Services failures across multiple availability zones caused an extended outage on its platform. I've been neutral and trying to be nice to Coinbase for a long time, like Switzerland, and I think it's time to end that. Coinbase is a lousy platform. Coinbase does a bad job for cryptocurrency. Coinbase fails every time we have a rally. It's long past time for this. Buy enough servers. Twitter used to be known for the fail whale. Now you don't see it anymore. For all the X stuff and whatever, blah, 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 there's no fail whale. They redid the architecture. It works now. If you're going to buy, I think buy on Strike, buy on some other service that I don't know about. But Coinbase, more and more, they spy on their customers. They report their customers. They fail during rallies. They offer a zillion altcoins. They have all these training programs. They'll pay you in altcoins to learn about altcoins. Brian stands up for the stablecoin interest, then almost instantly backs down. What was the point of all the lobbying and all the money and the donations and the blah, blah, blah? We won the crypto presidency. We're not going to get stablecoin interest. Not that that's what the fight was about. Victoria, what do you think really quick about the Coinbase outage? And just, this could have been a great company. At one point, it was a pretty good company. It seemed pretty good. It doesn't seem that way anymore. Again, I don't know the insiders. I don't know what's happening in there, but it just does not seem good.
Yeah, it is a real shame. I mean, it was a real foundation of really helping Bitcoin take off. I mean, I started my journey with Coinbase and I thought it was great. And I was there when, because it started off with just Bitcoin, and then I was there when they introduced Ethereum, and then they introduced Litecoin, and then it just kind of all went downhill from there. And then, of course, legislation came in to say that governments wanted to be able to see all the transactions, and that was the point at which I was like, okay, I'm out of here. So yeah, it is a shame. It is a shame. It was great, when it first started, but it has been spoilt along the way. And it's a real shame that, in their attempts to become bigger and more successful, it's lost its integrity, really. It's not what most of us hoped that it would be. When Coinbase was invented, you needed a good, strong place to be able to buy Bitcoin. And the fact that they existed at all, I think, really helped the price of Bitcoin to take off in 2016, 2017. But, all these altcoins and everything really muddied the water. And, Coinbase was a contributor to that.
Well, and you never hear about BitPay either. The only thing you hear is about BTC Pay Server and how much they're killing BitPay and how much they hate them for that whole issue. But much the same thing. These early companies don't keep going. And part of the reason is because I don't think they need to exist. And we've said this for a long time, and I said I'll have the AI look it up maybe next week, but I've said that Coinbase is a bridge, that having this kind of old world centralized exchange that acts as a bank and even offers you banking type services is not really necessary long-term for crypto. This is not a thing that we need. This is a thing that we need while we onboard people into crypto. Once the entire ecosystem is into crypto and lots of people have it, what do we need a Coinbase for? What we really need is a decentralized distributed exchange, and that's what Coinbase should have used their money for. Instead of doing this standard Peter Thiel startup thing We're going to monopolize the industry. We're going to lobby to create restrictions to fight our opponents to entrench our position, which is all great. And they made lots of money, and I'm sure that's great. But if they wanted to do something for technology and the world and for Bitcoin and for something that would actually last for like 100 years, they could have worked on this decentralized distributed exchange idea. And they could have done more things like not letting you hold your crypto there. They could have said, well, whether it's all our fault or not, hundreds of Bitcoin have been stolen from Coinbase. The way that we're going to stop that is we're not going to store hundreds of Bitcoin on Coinbase anymore. Instead, they said we're going to have vaults and we're going to have systems and we're going to have a bunker. They're going to buy that other guy's company that had the bunker and all of that, and we'll buy all these companies and do all the weird AI stuff and do all the political stuff that Brian did and all of that. They could have just offered the Bitcoin, built a decentralized distributed exchange and like been good guys and got out of the way and like created for their own obsolescence. Instead, they're like, we're going to last forever. And you all know how that goes, the feat of the Colossus of Rhodes, and the empire that would live forever, and no one even remembers it. So that's what Coinbase is going to be. They don't want to admit it, but it's already happening. And like Victoria said, they Goldman Sachs sells Bitcoin now. If you want to buy crypto, you don't have to go to some weird company. You don't have to learn about wallets. You don't have to be exposed to potential that your stuff could be stolen. You could just buy it through your normal stock market account, like whatever, blah, 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 call up your broker, and your broker's not going to say, use that weird company from San Francisco that rats out all their own people and like reports you to the IRS and all these things. They're going to say, oh, just use Goldman. Just use a banking company. And we saw this again with ChangeTip, the other companies in the past, where we needed a decentralized distributed tipping app. Instead, they made a centralized database that repeated all the problems of the previous databases. In the same way, Coinbase saw this problem, said, well, people need a decentralized distributed exchange. We'll build a centralized exchange that acts like a bank and lobbies for our own protection. So it's boring, it's predictable. They made a lot of money, but it's not going to last long term. We've got a couple more issues. Check out this new report from Claude, the AI, who helped us build our reports this week. We talked to the man who says Claude helped him recover $400,000 worth of Bitcoin locked in a wallet for over a decade. To be clear, Claude did not crack the Bitcoin account, did not crack the encryption. It guessed the password based upon a lot of detailed information about the user, which is creepy in its own right, if you want to think about it that way. User-generated passwords are not at all secure. As he says here, I was taking pictures of school notebooks and sent them to Claude, trying to get everything to piece together. I also said how I make passwords. I gave Claude context. The user said he recovered 5 Bitcoin. For the record, the New York Post reveals the gentleman's password. So I will give it to you for the hilarities and for the lols. Hopefully not for him as being stolen, but maybe they changed it a little. The password that the computer guessed was LOL 420 F star CK the capital police exclamation mark. Victoria Jones, what do you think? The AI helped guess his password. Certainly this guy's happy. But if you think about the larger implications, if AI has access to all of your data, although specifically how you make your passwords, all of your passwords are now insecure, which again is an advertisement for password manager and truly random passwords. Because if you just make those, it has no trail. It's not crackable in this way. This was a user-generated password. That's the weakness that the computer was able to guess it here.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, although reading the it's tricky, you know, although reading the article, it did indicate that he'd had to scan his notebooks and stuff and really program the AI to help him understand his brain and how he normally sets passwords. But at the same time, that's quite dangerous because you're training the AI as to how a human being comes up with their own password rather than using a computer generated password. So I don't think there's, you know, a completely foolproof system. I mean, it's clever that, they managed to use the AI to help him break it. What a relief, and what a payoff getting 400,000 in Bitcoin. But yeah, a lot of effort. At least there was a lot of effort to uncover it. And also he had to, introduce data that was handwritten. So of course that makes a difference. Typically the AI won't have access to anything unless it's digital, certainly won't have access to things that are handwritten. So it all depends on what the risks are. And of course, we have to, this is why we stay in touch with our friends who are software developers so that they can keep us in touch with, the existing vulnerabilities so that we can get round all of these things. And it is a bit of a nightmare to stay up to date. So yes, I definitely recognize, some of the weaknesses that you're highlighting there. But yeah, I think there's a way to go before it's more of a vulnerability than it is at the moment, but worth keeping an eye on.
Well, and just like with the Unabomber being turned in by his brother, you never know how they're going to catch these things. And if you look here, it says that Claude tried 3.5 trillion passwords. So one of the things is that this was a wallet.dat, or it was an offline file where they could guess the password seemingly an infinite number of times. This is different than some of the other Bitcoin wallet problems where the guy had it locked in, say, an encryption program written for a hard drive, and the hard drive encryption only gives you 5 chances. So those 5 chance ones are a lot harder than one of these where presumably they could guess upwards of 3.5 trillion times. But if you see here in the tweet on the screen right now, it wasn't the 3.5 trillion guesses that worked. It was an old seed phrase found in a college notebook with an old wallet file. So again, it's the actions of the user, which again, as a security type person, we know are typically horrible, and that the user reused a seed phrase to create a wallet, used the same seed phrase as a password later on, stored the seed phrase in plain text in a notebook or whatever, and eventually added it back into a knowledge system in an attempt to break this password, which again shows you what I've been talking about AI for weeks now. If you have old projects that seemed impossible, for this guy breaking into this Bitcoin wallet, for me transcribing the World Crypto Network and being able to refer to old episodes really quickly, you can do it now with AI. You have an army of agents that can analyze your data. And I heard people talking about it again this morning, and they were, oh, it hallucinates, oh, it does bad reports, whatever. My experience, if you give it the data, if you have actual transcripts, it will search the actual transcripts because that's easier than creating fake data. So this guy gave his actual notebooks, his actual hard drives, whatever, anything to try to crack this Bitcoin wallet, and it worked out. So congratulations to this guy. One less Bitcoin wallet locked up. Victoria, any more on Bitcoin wallets and our new friend, maybe a friend, the AI?
Well, in spite of how sophisticated AI is, I don't think your wallets are in any danger yet. And of course, ultimately, what we want to do is use Bitcoin as a currency that's completely independent of the government, in order to exist the corruption in centralized money. So don't despair just yet. Keep learning about them and keep using them whenever you can. Still a long way to go in order for us to meet that objective.
And use a password manager. Come on, if he'd used a password manager, he would have had a stronger password and he would have saved it in his password manager. Of course, you shouldn't save your wallet passwords in your password manager. You shouldn't save your Bitcoins in your password manager. But if he had a more random password and he'd written it down, he wouldn't have had to look for it for all this time. So password
Yeah. On the
hygiene.
subject of passwords, actually, when I was working with Darren, we did a little video on passwords, which was really interesting because, of course, Darren's a software developer. And one of the things he pointed out was one of the most secure passwords you can come up with is 3 simple words. So, blue, green apple, for example, is an excellent password because actually the number of tries you need in order to break that password really impacts exponentially. So when companies tell you that you need capital letters and smaller letters and special characters. That's not actually the way to get a really secure password. You could just use three normal, so my dog Toby, for example, would be a much more secure password than even the one he came up with, all the special characters and the capital letters and small letters. So I found that quite interesting when Darren taught me that.
Well, and potentially more memorable as well. We probably should have called it passphrase instead of password, and then everyone would just start from the beginning. Oh, it's ate my dinner. Oh, that's so easy. I mean, I guess people can't type well. There's an idea that shorter passwords are easier to type if you're not typing, if you're looking at the numbers and letters. But again, this kind of thing has led to this kind of weakness of now these terrible passwords. We have just one more quick story. I don't have that much to say about it. I don't really know that much about it, but there was an announcement on Twitter for Nostr Mail, the open protocol for decentralized email, the first decentralized email protocol powered by Nostr. Own your own identity, your own keys, and your own inbox. No central authority, no gatekeepers. I assume it's open source. I hope it's open source. But it sounds like a good idea, replacing mail servers and sending it over Nostr, having a new secure version of email. So not sure what's going on, but if you want to check out Nostr Mail on Twitter and other places like that. Victoria, what do you think about Nostr Mail? Really quick before we move on to the end of the show.
Yeah, I mean, decentralized anything I think is great. Whenever you have anything that's centralized, there's a possibility for corruption. Although one of the problems with email is spam. And so monitoring that in a decentralized system can be a bit tricky. So I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. Obviously, it's above my pay grade to try and analyze that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Definitely an interesting idea.
If I had to guess, there's going to be lots and lots of spam, followed by lots and lots of filtering, probably AI filtering. So we'll see how that goes. A lot of old problems that seemed impossible are now just have the AI fix that for a couple of days problems. So we'll see, and it's an exciting idea. We're running out of time. Victoria, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
No, not particularly. I can't think of anything to predict that we haven't already covered in the show. And my stories are on the down low at the moment. My website hasn't had any attention for a while, apart from, clearing out the stuff that we did with Darren, because we've put that to the side for now. So yeah, taking a sabbatical really, apart from appearing on your good show.
Well, we're continuing to plan for the Majorca convention in July. I think a lot of people are going to be going to Majorca again. It's a good time. And beyond that, we're looking at the Manchester convention in November again. I don't have all the details yet. I think that's going to happen again. And I've heard good things about BTC Prague. I'm not going to be able to make it this year, but I hope to make it next year. And so there are some conferences coming up as we approach the summer. Regardless of everything else that's happening in the world, you could always go to a Bitcoin conference or a meetup near you. I don't have that much to say story-wise. I'm still sticking with For All Mankind, just an incredible TV show, an alternate universe where the US and Mars fight to build a moon base. And then there's a lot more, as you can see, leading to a Mars colony. The most recent episode was just absolutely thrilling. Incredible things are happening there. And at the same time, in a slightly different vein, incredible things are happening on The Boys. The Boys, which is a satire of comic books and our society. At first, people thought that the Trump or Homelander character was a positive betrayal and that he was a good Superman. Of course, people watching the show really knew he was the ultimate bad Superman. What happens if Superman is bad? It's getting worse and worse in the most recent and almost final episodes, where not a major spoiler, but a little of a spoiler, Homelander is getting religious, starting to declare himself as a new prophet, a new God, better than Jesus, all of those things. The Boys, it's very gross and inappropriate with lots of exploding heads and much worse. But the satire is very strong. The religious, the political, the satire of strength. What would you do with an unchecked Superman? And that's actually Lex Luthor's theory in the new Superman movie, is that Superman needs to be checked. A lot of the time, Lex Luthor, the villain, is just kind of acting for, what if Superman went rogue? Oh, we don't have a backup plan. We don't know how to stop him. And in The Boys, although it's very gory and horribly inappropriate, we do see this strong satire of, in America, what could happen if Superman went off the rails, declares himself God, declares himself the head of a religion, the Democratic Church of America, mandatory religion, so on and so forth. All of this is being addressed in this because it was a comic book, because you could draw The Boys as a comic book and you could put your ideas out there. And then eventually they came to this great TV show. I'm also still watching Resident Alien, also based on a comic book, if you want to check that out. But thanks again to everybody for joining us. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below and subscribe if you haven't already. But we're out of time. Until next time, bye-bye.